Papa's back. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Oh God, I'm out of breath. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you're going to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom freaking Frackin. Had bronchitis for a week and I'm still getting over it, and I'm slowly dying, and the longer that I talk, the longer I run out of breath, and oh my God, my lungs are on fire. Grossi. And today we're going to take a look at some of the top wide receiver free agents this upcoming offseason. And considering that the Green Bay Packers need a wide receiver or two, I was curious as to whether or not any of these guys are actually worth it, or are we going to have to pay out the ass for the majority of them, or should we just go with the draft, which will be another episode. But before we get to that, I want to do a big shout out and thank you to Angel Diaz for joining over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy. It is much appreciated. If you would like to support me for a few smackaroos, head on over to patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy. So to get started, I think it's important to mention that this upcoming draft class has been highly regarded as one of the deepest classes at wide receiver in quite some time. So I'm going to do a little prediction here, which shouldn't sound like a very bold prediction, but I think the Packers are going to draft a wide receiver. That's the content you subscribed for. Let's just say that maybe we don't want to go for the draft. Maybe we want to get a veteran guy. Maybe we want to get an established wide receiver. And that brings us to these 7 gentlemen who will find themselves being free agents, even though the majority of them will probably get re-signed by their teams this coming spring. Numero uno, the top wide receiver for this free agent class, and that, of course, is Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper, just becoming 25 years old, had career highs in touchdowns and in passing yards, 79 receptions, 1,189 yards, and 8 touchdowns for the Cowboys. And in 2019, he was paid $14 million. But the Cowboys, I mean, I have to imagine they're going to look to retain some of their top talent, and they already locked down Ezekiel Elliott as their top running back. They'll lock down Dak Prescott as their top QB, obviously, and then they'll lock down, I think, their top wide receiver in Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is obviously going to make a ton of money. There's a ton of upside with him in that he's young. While he does have an injury history, the fact that he's coming off his best season yet, I think this guy is going to fetch quite an offer. So when it comes to the Green Bay Packers, while I would love to have Amari Cooper on the team, is that he's a young, rising, can be wide receiver number 1 type of guy, I think he's going to be way too expensive to pay. Considering we're already paying a wide receiver 1, Davante Adams, I highly doubt that Goot is going to go out and potentially get him. So I think that Amari Cooper is going to be one of those guys that we're just going to let go, even if he does hit the free agency market. I think another team will definitely, like the Cardinals, for example, they can swoop in and potentially pick up Amari Cooper for a whole bunch of money, or some of these other teams that have a ton of cap room that they can just throw at and need an offensive weapon. Number 2, who is the most intriguing wide receiver, and we've actually already done a video on him, and that is 31-year-old AJ Green. So missed half of 2018 and then missed all of the 2019 season with an ankle and toe injury. He was paid $12 million in 2019. He's one of those guys that, I scratched my head on what he's actually going to command in the free market. I think that he's going to get paid a whole bunch of money, but if he does wind up leaving the Bengals, it's going to be interesting on what price tag he can wind up fetching, considering that he hasn't played in a season and a half. But obviously, when he does play, the guy is absolutely phenomenal, right? 2017, going to the Pro Bowl, putting up ridiculous stats, and he is one of those dynamic playmakers. So I don't think the Packers are going to be able to get him for cheap, and and there comes a risk with it as well, considering all of the injuries. I have to think that, with the Bengals picking up their new franchise quarterback in the draft, that they might want to keep AJ Green around for a few more years. AJ Green has expressed that he wants to stay on the Bengals. I don't know why. But I think that AJ Green is going to be a little bit too pricey, and again, he's also on the wrong side of 30, so that's problematic as well. Then number 3, you have Emmanuel Sanders at 32 years old. This past season, after getting traded to the 49ers, all in all had 66 receptions, 869 yards, and 5 touchdowns, and was paid $10 million this past year. Yeah, no, I'm not interested. I was potentially interested in him picking him up in the middle of the season when we needed somebody, but at this point, I'm okay with not getting Sanders. The guy is going to be 33 years old, and shows flashes, absolutely. He definitely helped the 49ers reach the Super Bowl, fell off a little bit near the end, but I think that Emmanuel Sanders, for me, is just not worth the money, and I think that he's, again, just a little too old for my taste. And then number 4, you have a guy that Packers fans have been clamoring for quite some time, and that is 26-year-old Robbie Anderson. Obviously has the speed, is one of those deep threats, has improved, right? Robbie Anderson was obviously one of Sam Darnold's favorite targets when he could actually throw the ball and didn't have mono. 52 receptions this past season with 779 yards and 5 touchdowns. And in 2019, he was paid $3 million. So obviously coming off of his rookie contract, this is one of those guys that I can see could be a boom or a bust. But Goody has shown some interest in Robbie Anderson before, in that they thought they had a deal in place already for this past season, when they were thinking that, hey, we're gonna trade for him, and that fell through. So I wouldn't be surprised if Goody goes after him, but I don't think that he's gonna offer him a big-time contract coming right out of the early days of free agency. But this is one of those guys I really wouldn't mind getting if we're able to not get completely and totally fleeced and ripped off with his contract. So he's most likely, I don't think the Jets are going to wind up retaining him. But, if we could take Robbie Anderson and potentially, sign him to, an $8 million deal, something like that, I think I would totally go for it on this one, because we need a deep threat. You have MVS, who has been super inconsistent. We still got guys like EQ, who didn't play last season, but the Packers are in need of a deep threat besides just Devontae Adams, who is just ridiculous at running routes, and I think Robbie Anderson could definitely fulfill that need. Then number 5, don't call it a comeback, except that's exactly what it would be. Randall Cobb, please come home. I miss you. I bought your jersey a few years ago, and now it just sits in the closet collecting dust. Randall Cobb, listen, he's going to be 30 years old this year, 55 receptions, 828 yards, and 3 touchdowns, was paid just $2 million in 2019. I don't think it's going to happen, though, considering that we let Cobb go. And listen, the Cowboys were able to sign him for super duper cheap, but I think if the Packers wanted to keep him, they would have, and he probably would have taken a hometown discount. But considering that Mike McCarthy is heading into Dallas, I wouldn't be surprised if he signs another 1-year deal with the Cowboys and he never hits free agency. Then at number 6, you have Rashad Perryman, who has seen a litany of teams in just his 4-year career. 26 years old, 36 receptions, 645 yards, and 6 touchdowns this past season, in which he was only paid $2 million. This is one of those guys that I feel like he could be one of those bargain hunters. You go in the very end and you're seeing what's left over in the clearance rack in free agency, and you're like, oh, look, it's Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, I'll watch that a couple times and maybe pick it up for $5. I feel like Rashad Perryman can be one of those guys to add some depth to the Packers wide receiver core. Again, he comes with some issues and some inconsistencies, but I think, if he's around at the very end, maybe you call him up and sign him to a super cheap 1-year deal, so it's kind of like a prove-it year. But this is one of those guys that I really wouldn't completely and totally mind, but I'm not expecting the world out of him. Then number 7, you got Phillip Dorsett, the 27-year-old Patriots wide receiver who had 29 catches, 397 yards, and 5 touchdowns this past season. I was only paid $1.5 million. Dorsett, now we've talked about on this show all the issues that Tom Brady and the New England Patriots had with their wide receivers this past year, and Dorsett was part of the problem. They really were never able to link up, not really on the same page at all, and the Patriots, like the Packers, are going to be looking for a wide receiver threat. Dorsett, again, he's one of those guys, maybe like a bargain at the very end that you could potentially pick up, but I gotta think, with guys like Perryman and Dorsett, You want to potentially go out and get a playmaker, but you don't want to spend a whole bunch of money, but doesn't everybody? And so looking at all of these guys, I think the one that really makes the most sense out of all of them is Robbie Anderson, because while he does have that bust potential, I think that his speed and his deep threat ability kind of makes him more attractive. And if you can sign him for under $10 million, looking at like $7-8 million, I think that could be a home run for the Packers. But overall, if you had my honest opinion here, I think it makes more sense for the Packers to just spend a high draft pick on wide receiver. Get somebody at the end of round 1, or what I think is most likely going to happen, get somebody in the second round. We have some good history drafting wide receivers in the second round, and I think that makes the most logical sense for the Packers. Yes, you won't get an immediate established guy, but you should be getting a second rounder who's going to be able to at least make some kind of impact on the team in his first season. And listen, we still have, obviously, guys like EQ. We have Alan Lazard coming back for another year. And who knows, maybe guys like MVS will eventually step up. I don't think we'll see Kumaro around, and definitely not Allison. But, I think that there's going to be a lot of competition at camp. Hey, we have Ryan Grant. But, yeah, if you're going to ask me, I say we go through the draft or try to get Robbie Anderson on a pretty cheap deal. But let me know what you think down in the comments below about the wide receiver free agent pool coming up this spring. Let me know what you think the Packers should do. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy on all social media. See down below. Check out Backcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout out and thank you to all the Patreon members over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy. But we're back, baby. Monday through Friday content. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack, go.